IT Labs, you know, a project that we've been committed as a business board for, and it was a really positive feedback to see that now come to realisation and to see the next phase already moving towards those being available for September. So there's some really strong aspects there, and there's also conversations linked to UK Brief about rail infrastructure in Peterborough. I've met again with a team in Cambridge ahead and for team, really looking at making sure that where we're looking for evidence and research of what we're doing, we're inventing the wheel and being aware of their work and how that can be integrated. Many of you will know that there's work now thinking of Oxcam partnership to see whether there's opportunities to make sure we have a more joint approach. It is also the time of the year where the combined authority has been, in my view, very self-reflective. There have been an awful lot of workshops thinking about economic planning, state of the nation, and all sorts of other themes. I attended 2 last week, and again, whilst I would, as those come to fruition, that we need to make sure that they align centrally and there is purpose in those strategies, I hope they will provide some extra insights to the business board shaping opportunities for growth. So put those on the radar for when they come across the table. In addition to that, I think we've all been very clear that the landscape has changed as a business board from our opportunity to look with investments or funds that we have available for projects, and that now we need to be also, alongside supporting and validating the work of the combined authority, we also need to be bringing ideas to the table and looking at projects that we can start to build. There is some work already afoot trying to develop that, but I do hope in upcoming meetings it's something that we can start to tap into your experiences and potentially ideas or projects that you're aware of across our region. We can look to see how we can leverage, maximise those. But please do feel that it's very much a case of if it's anything on the radar, please do connect. I know some of you already have spoken to me about that. I feel very positive. There's been a sense of we wanted to kind of put the foot on the accelerator and move forward, and it's not necessarily been immediately possible because of that change of funding landscape. But I think that we now have our structures in place on the back of Reed as an opportunity for us to certainly have more activity and help support the undoubted growth curve. I think I will leave it there unless there are any questions in terms of my summary. There are definitely more interesting projects ahead. Mike.
I just, with the Oxford-Cambridge partnership, I was at a presentation last week where they were talking about the observatory and then the support for England investment through that partnership. Are those things that we will be taking advantage of, or I was just worried there might be some areas of duplication?
I think all opportunities are ones we want to try and tap into. We have a voice and representation on the Oxford-Cambridge partnership. One of the things they reached out was for me to join, but we already have representation there with Councillor Richard Smith and with Nick Johnson. I think it's fair to untapped opportunities that we perhaps can maximise or work more closely on. I think there's also an element that often when we look at a high level opportunity for investment, there's a place which tends to be the largest opportunities, the largest internationally linked projects and opportunities. And I think there's also a role, a layer that sits below that, which is about more regional inward investment opportunities when we accelerate that. I absolutely think there's always ways to work more closely and make sure we can link to that. And I think from some time now, one of the things we've said is there's lots of research, there's lots of evidence, and there's lots of organisations working across our region. We have to find ways to utilise the best bits of that to leverage it, but at the same time, we're really savvy to not duplicate work that's already being done. Again, I'm more than happy to share insights from my first formal meeting that's coming up, and if there's anything else that we can do as insights or advice from your experiences working in those partnerships, that I absolutely am keen to hear that.
I guess there's also a question as to who the government talks to, whether they talk to a partnership thinking they're talking to us.
Well, I think absolutely. I think there are different stakeholders, and I think there is absolutely government voice, particularly high-level civil servants that work to communicate with them. We just want to make sure we're at the table of different conversations that are relevant to our region. Richard, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, I think it's a really interesting point that you make, and I think if we look at what's happening elsewhere across the UK, there is a join-up between, the combined authorities in the north, the Northern Powerhouse, and there is a join-up between the combined authorities in the Midlands and the Midlands Energy. And I think it's all about scale, really, at the end of the day, and making sure we get embed the things that are important to us as a combined authority in that wider promotional remit, which can, equally add force to the cases that we're making for our own area. So I think we're not in competition with each other. We're actually got a benefit of collaborating together. And when it comes back to the point about, voice with government, I think this government and possibly future governments do see, area combined authorities as a key part of creating that infrastructure for a single voice for an area. And I think, this government's been very clear about the importance of a single voice. And so I think the combined authorities are in an important place to draw down a relationship with central government that some of the other partnerships that are not democratically legitimate, like a combined authority is, it puts us in a better place to enable some of those things to happen at scale. So if you looked at, the scale of devolution deals compared to the sort of funding that powerhouses are securing, including Northern Powerhouse and Midlands Energy, it's very small scale, and tends to be very much focused on, the sort of trade and inward investment agenda rather than a wider agenda.
I think like all these things, Mike, there's, and I can share from a personal perspective, there is as much about learning as there is sharing some of those opportunities and meetings. And I don't like to presume, so I think it's quite helpful to understand what other conversations and what priorities are happening in our region and where we can shape what we can. But I'm also really conscious that one of the things, opportunities come to the table, is to then unpick individual members' experiences working in those spaces to see how we can turn opportunities into reality. And I think that's the key one. Is there's a lot of research of evidence, but we want to see how we accelerate that again. On a much smaller point, but it's something that I know I had shared before. But as we were doing it as a public meeting, it's a good time to say that the contact details of the business board have all been updated on the combined authority website, identifying different areas and sectors of experience for all the good folks, and including in that contact details on LinkedIn for all. That may at this stage be a very small step, but it's one step for encouraging as we increase reaching out as a business board membership to provide a conduit that people want to reach out and connect with us, share with somebody with particular sector experience, opportunities or projects that are coming across that patch. So please do, if you're watching this now or at a later date, do please reach out to a relevant business board member if you'd like to have a chat and find out more. Right, thank you for that, folks. Let's move on. Oh, sorry, Andy.
Sorry, just listening. Very interesting. A couple of suggestions. I wonder if we have a from UK next in the formal meeting. It is our first go. We're trying it out, and there's no agenda there. Let's just see how it went and see how we use the springboard and what learnings we've got and what sort of investor reaction we get. If moving forward we're not going to get much investment direct from government, but if we're going to do in different ways, it'd be good to know how those channels are working, how they're operating. And then I'd say that secondly, building on that, it might be useful in the next informal session to do a mapping of the different routes, because it's not just CPCA and Pan Regional Partnership. We also have the Greater Cambridge City deal. We have Peter Freeman's Cambridge 2040/50 plans as well, and lots of other things going on in our regional environment. I wonder if it would be worth us all just sitting down and trying to map that again in the spirit of, I think my perspective is like making sure we understand the mechanisms by which we're going to secure future. How those fit together will be quite useful.
As always, very valid points. I think the debrief from REAP is really important. We know it's our first year. It's to optimize it next year. So I think it'll be really helpful to get a debrief from officers and just talk about things that we plan early or do differently for next year. As you and I have discussed in terms of networks and connections, I'm very conscious that we've got some people like yourself who are very well connected in different spaces within our community, and a mapping of where would be really, really useful. One of the things I always think of is as an entity when we're looking at reaching out for support, whether it's support for research or evidence or any activities or projects that we're doing, where possible, we should be looking within our patch, and we should also be aware if there are other entities who are already working on a similar project or a similar interest. And given there is so many overarching layers of activity within our space, I think a bit of a mapping would be really, really helpful there. I suspect almost the whole mapping exists if I were to consolidate all of your good selves experience, get it onto a whiteboard, and maybe that's what we need to do, have a bit of a session like that, just plot that through, and in some cases just understand the focus of different entities. Before I finish, I'll come to you. Just one final thing, just to add to my little mix of updates. One thing that we also really need to do is we represent a number of councils within the combined authority, and each of them have their own economic plans, their own ideas and innovation that they're looking to propel in the coming months and years. So I spoke to officers and requested for future business board meetings on a rotational basis. We will have an officer from each of the authorities come in turn and talk about projects and activities and where their priorities are. That ensures they're on our radar. Gives them an opportunity to really make sure they're on our radar if they wish, but I think also will help with that attempt to be more joined up in terms of how we then look at some of our own priorities. So I hope that's okay. George, thank you.
Just a very quick point. When raising any items that you may want to see at informal meetings, please, if you have any thoughts, do let me know via email, because we've got a forward plan going for that now. So it'd be useful just to keep that kind of feedback for us as members and officers. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, George. Anything else, folks, you want to raise at this point? I'm going to leverage those connections we talked about in the thematic committee at this point now for item 7, which is just where the cycle has aligned recent meetings, an opportunity for feedback from some of our committees. The first one is transport and infrastructure. So I'm looking to Andy and Rebecca on opposite sides of the room.
So the last meeting was in, I've got to be careful what I'm saying because the chair is in the meeting as well. So she'll correct me.
It was a very lovely meeting, was it?
Very well chaired. Excellent chair. This meeting was in March, so it does seem quite a long time ago. As has been the theme recently, buses predominate. There wasn't a significant decision on buses. That's waiting on the audit. We agreed an extension to the e-scooter trial in Cambridge and an extension of the print. We talked about local transport connectivity plan and all the strategies and work streams that fall out of that. We had an update on progress for the Transforming Cities Fund. And then from a buses point of view, as I mentioned, the £1 youth fare, bus shelter improvements, precept investment list, and some specific services were discussed. But the big one on buses, which is the franchising potential, has gone off future to both the hours and
Is that now looking at a longer term future than a short term decision making? I appreciate there's external requirements.
I think that the behind the scenes conversations are still ongoing. It will come back certainly into a future combined authority board meeting and hopefully future transport infrastructure. Before that, into potentially going out for the consultation in the summer. But in the interim, we're moving towards an enhanced partnership way of working either as a stepping stone or as the thing. It will depend on how the consultation goes and the decisions.
Andy, anything else to add?
No, that's very good. So if I go down to, perhaps, because I can't remember March, the next meeting, which isn't until June, I assume there was some period.
Got a summary in advance.
So in advance, no, it's obviously we want to discuss before for the meeting. So on the 810 update, following got announced ages ago, there was some of the 810. That's quite a complex subject. But there is going to be an item on with speech to March railroad. I'd like the business board taking a perspective on whether we see that as something which is specifically important to business. Not judging whether it is or it isn't, but something like a new sustainable transport route sounds like something that we should probably be discussing. So something back ago to that meeting, business board view. And one that we did bring up before, I think we're okay on it, but it's Peterborough Station area. So we're trying to link not just Peterborough Station, but how does that impact on the business case for the wider Peterborough project. I don't think that necessarily needs to come to the business board, but it's good to see that come in again because we highlighted it at the transport committee when it was just Peterborough stations. So I think that it needs to consider the wider water.
And that Peterborough Station water is one of the thematic conversation points that are sitting down on the as well.
Yeah.
Bring that.
I just think with speech to March Rail, which I remember supporting this 7 or 8 years ago, the letter. Why am I sitting here now talking about, there's a talk about with speech to March trial being considered or review update to the report? It might be swift that business board had a strong view one way or the other on the value of that to business. And I'm not prejudging at all, it just seems strange, it keeps coming up, we never seem to nail it one way or the other. So I'd quite like there to be a discussion at a business board meeting, perhaps seeing the business case before it goes to tick.
Before I open up, Anna, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I would hugely appreciate our business board representatives being able to come to that meeting with those strong steers. I think that would be very helpful for us. And it might be worth, for example, I could convene a meeting for maybe yourself, Al, and our TIC representatives to talk through where things are going with the rail piece, so that you're able to take that to a broader conversation. I think that would be very helpful for all of us. Similarly with the A10, because I imagine there are going to be a lot of different stakeholder views on how the A10 work should proceed, and I think understanding where members of the business board sit within that would be extremely helpful, whether if there is a unanimous or fairly united view. I think that would be really helpful for us as a committee and for me as chair as well. So absolutely endorse that. I think that would be really helpful. And just to pick up on what was said around franchising, it's very much just at the moment, the business case on bus reform has been sitting within the audit process, and there's a kind of strong understanding that it needs to spend the time it needs within that audit process. As soon as it's not the other side of that, then that will end up being tabled on the appropriate committees. So it's very much still there. It's just
I actually support we should look at that within 12 forward plan, but also there's an opportunity for a separate meeting. I think one of the workshops last week, and I'll try and tell you which workshop, I will get the name wrong, but one of the workshops was looking about our region, transport, economy, housing, the whole broader picture of our landscape. And as often happens with data, there tends to be comparators looking at similar comparables around the country. We're very strong in many areas. There was an example of measuring types between similar distances for cities in other regions compared to what we have as that traditional corridor or the Cambridge link. And for the same mileage, it was 2-3 times as long. And that continues that conversation further and further about actually within a given hour how far reach, how far by car, by train. And again, there's less accessibility because of the transport infrastructure in our region. And it's not about that connection, it's obviously about the global connection more broadly, but fundamentally, this region's going to grow economically, it's got to have infrastructure. Where it does dovetail in, finally, is obviously as we start to look at opportunities and projects, we have previously talked about those kind of clear layer acetate sheets, which is we want to be supporting projects that facilities where appropriate skills and training, where it had any kind of net zero implications. The more we can overlay those, the more credible projects they are. So a new rail link, where's the economic, what business growth is there going to be either end of that skills growth?
So how far out to the transport infrastructure? Because when we talk about railway, there's other things, there's an alternative, it's 10 years away.
Autonomous vehicles,
Yeah, so,
autonomous
you know,
transport.
and it's probably more violent in some cases as it comes along than actually trains. So I suppose, you know, how far, particularly when these projects take so long, do we actually look at the technology that's going to be used?
Do you want me to, it'd be helpful to
You
talk?
don't reveal it, like you can.
It does nothing that groundbreaking, I'm afraid. I mean, what I would say is I think the most important thing is for us to specify the kind of problem we're seeking to solve and what we think good looks like. And then there will be, you're right, a range of technology that might help us with that, depending on what needs we feel need meeting. I know that some of our transport team have been looking just at expos at the kind of new technologies that are coming through. My suspicion is that those new technologies are going to be available far sooner than 10 years.
Yeah, some of them are being used in Hong Kong or wherever. How should we look?
So certainly from my point of view, I think with quite a lot of these big infrastructure projects, thinking about what we want to get out of it, what levels of connectivity we need, the kind of things we need to get along those rails, how we want to link people up. If we can really have a strong view on those kinds of things, that's going to be extremely helpful for us as a transport team, because then we can use our leverage. And I should say that with the rail project, for example, that isn't something that is within our gift. It's about talking with other authorities, but we need to be exercising our convening power and our lobbying power as strongly as possible. So knowing what the perspectives are will be very, very helpful. So this sounds like something we can do with talking about sooner rather than later, to be honest.
Rebecca, sorry.
I don't disagree with Nissan's point or indeed Dan's answer. I suppose what was going through my mind, it's not about the kind of cutting edge bit, it's about the whole of the county and the problem. For example, if I talk about EV charging, which has been a recent, it's not can we get it in the cities perhaps, it's how we cover the whole of the patch, particularly the rural areas, and it will be the same difficulty. And I think from a authority perspective, it's about bringing it to everybody rather than bringing the best bits to a few.
What she said, Jen.
Mike.
I'm just thinking about that type of infrastructure. Just something I've come across a couple of times in the last month or so is grid restrictions, and looking at sort of areas where you might be able to bring in additional investment to actually unlock power potential and open up whole new sites on that side. And I'm not sure if it's something that we've looked at in terms of where there might be grid pinch points, which might be holding back developments, but there's been a lot of private investment into companies that are there to invest in infrastructure to support those sort of smart grids, both at domestic and industrial levels.
It's a very fair point. I do know there are projects in that area.
Where does that sit? Does that sit in the transport infrastructure?
Well, that's what I wondered.
We're going to have to put up the transport, which is not careful, but the EV charging does address how we're going to get associated with that. There's also a separate GCP activity on delivering additional solar power stations as well, which is very, very handy. We are going to go into transport, which is very careful, because the autonomous vehicle question is a good one, because actually autonomous vehicles are going to start trialing on the West Campus site in the next few months. And actually the off-road bus solutions, which is going to be called off-road bus solutions, they're actually designed so they can take autonomous vehicles or different forms of technology as it emerges. So a lot of the planning that the officers are doing, they don't just take current technology. They just, so when I say with speech to March Rail, I'm just saying a simple transport theme between March. And that's just, what we're establishing is how valuable that from an economic perspective, quite how they then deliver what goes on there.
I think we have a very clear action point, apart from perhaps having a more detailed conversation in due course. Can I suggest, given that we have just talked about empowering different members of the business board to lead on different areas, if anybody has any questions or thoughts related to the conversation just here in the first instance, would you share them with Andy and give them an opportunity to raise them at the transport committee and see which bits are appropriate, and then maybe in the next update you can share a bit about those points that have been raised. Clearly, there are some topics where there doesn't seem to be a natural space where they fit, maybe interconnected. And we actually need to be mindful of that.
So it is transport and infrastructure as opposed to transport infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good example of where we were talking earlier about the convening role of the combined authority as being something that could bring different organisations together. That issue of the grid is a very good example of that. So you're right that to an extent we are the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, that it's also something that's absolutely bound into the local plans, for example, which would be the district councils. There will be things that the county, that the tier 1 authorities want to bring into that as well. So it's a very good example of how, as a combined authority, we might be well placed to bring people together to have those conversations and to support the conversation that are already happening in other authorities as well. So.
Good. Well, it seems like our task here has been to make your next meeting even busier.
Always happy for that.
And my final point before going off is we have broached on another topic, but you know what, if this is what are passionate about it, why not? We should also be mindful that, and you alluded to it, there has been quite a lot of research done in certain parts of our region by GCP and others. And we shouldn't reinvent the wheel. We should be looking at it. There's some really good work that was done there and is being done. So that's another one to come. Richard, I saw your hand waving. Do you want to?
Yeah, all I was just going to say was that picking up on what Anna was saying there about bringing everyone together, there's also bringing everyone together nationally as well. So the opportunity, you know, in the latest framework for devolution is very much around having a memorandum of understanding with Great British Railways. So if you look at what some city regions have done in relation to that, Liverpool City region being a very good example, they've actually now prioritised their aspirations around improvements to rail infrastructure and services across their patch. You know, and that is quite a challenging thing to do, but that's kind of the space we want to get into. But on top of that is obviously the multimodal integration that we also need to have.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both for a healthy discussion on that one. We've only got one report out so far. We've got to move now on to environment and sustainability. I'm not sure our members will have an opportunity to attend yet.
I haven't.
So it's Emma and Tim who I know is on the line, but I think that the last meeting is going to be out of sync with since you've taken on that responsibility. But hopefully in future meetings you'll be able to share some updates on. And last but not least, skills and employment. Charlotte, you obviously heavily active supporting the Chair of the Employment Skills Board, as well as linking into other bits on skills.
Yeah, and probably still a little out of sync. So the last committee meeting was the 4th of March, the morning of the business board. So I would have provided that update at our last meeting. However, tomorrow morning is the Employment and Skills Board, and there will be exploring universal support. We'll be supporting, we're discussing exploring apprenticeships and technical training, which is so important for the region. And also we'll have an update on the Good Work Charter, which was a concept tabled at prior meetings. We've since done some engagement with businesses to get their perspective and their point of view. So we'll receive an update. And then the next skills committee will be the 17th of June, where no doubt an FE cold spot review, which is currently underway. I know there's certainly some sessions taking place in Ely, I think Wednesday this week. The outcome of that report will come to fruition. I think it's also worthwhile just noting that there's been some really important work at Peterborough taking place. So Peterborough City Council at the Skills and Employment Partnership Board have just received the initial strategy for skills for the city, and also the local skills improvement plan. The annual report will be published shortly in the month of June. So they're probably the key things that business board members need to be aware of from a skills point of view.
Thank you. And maybe some of those reports that we can filter through to officers to share through as well as
absolutely.
Again, I think we have the will to try and reach out. Excellent. Has anybody else attended any meetings, committee-wise, at this point that they want to share before I move on? No, I see Kate is online, but Kate, have you an opportunity to attend those? those meetings yet. I hope that our next meeting, we'll all have a chance to attend and provide your own thoughts and feedback. I should also add, if anything crops up on those meetings, it's really interesting. Please don't wait till the next business board to share. So, more help with just bite-sized chunks of information reports instead. Let's move on to a much more exciting topic, item 8, CPCA Director's Report. Richard Kenny, Executive Director of Business Growth, Combined Authority. Richard's an opportunity to talk about stuff that I've probably already talked about, stolen your thunder a little bit, so I apologize.
No, not at all. I mean, I just wanted to add a few things to what you said, really, Alan. That's all. So I'll be really, really brief. Just to give some assurances around UK Reef. The tent or pavilion, if you like, gets built this week. I think the building of that pavilion starts on Thursday, which is good news. Everything's in order. It's a very flexible space. It can be used from everything from a fireside chat to a panel session to a round table. So there's a really good space and there's really good infrastructure in there, digital TV screens and everything else that you would expect to capture the data of conversations and investors that might enter the pavilion, picking up on Andy's point about, you know, being able to track exactly what we do get.
Could you just mute for us, please?
And secondly, just to say that the website goes live, so the investment prospectus and the interaction with the investment pipeline and all of that comes together, and that should all come together and go live, I think, tomorrow. So it's also should be good, and you'll be pleased to hear this out. The lapel badges have arrived, but I haven't actually seen them yet. But I understand they've arrived. So we will have our lapel badges, which is all very good. But generally speaking, I mean, I think we've got a good set of events together. We've got 6 key events that we've previously shared with you at panels. And thanks for everybody that's contributing. It's really appreciated to those panel discussions and those panel debates. We've also got 2 fringe events, and we've also added another 3 events because whilst we were offering space for take up for other events for the local authorities, that take up hasn't been as high as we thought it would be. So we've decided on the back of the opportunities of knowing who's going to be in and around UK Reef to try and factor in a few more events as opportunities on that things such as, you know, fiscal evolution, the opportunities, launch reports, and so on. So I think it's really starting to come together. So just wanted to report back on where we are with UK Reef. It feels very, very near because it's only this time next week, I think, we'll be on our way. I just briefly wanted to say that the second big stakeholder event took place at the end of last week on our shared ambitions. And I just want to emphasise how important that is for us because it's really about what we want to do as a region, as an area coming together. So it's really important that the business board feels that work is moving in the right direction, and the more that you can make a contribution to that work, either in those sessions or outside of those sessions, would be very much appreciated. So I wanted to also flag that. And then the third thing really was to thank everybody for the contribution to the informal business board. I think the idea of us coming together face to face, trying to sort of benefit of your expertise, networks, knowledge, and insights is really important to us, and we want to set in play now a series of those workshops moving forwards. And it was really great to have all of these contributions, and we will be making sure that we follow up in terms of the actions. Then my final thing to do that I want to do is I want to introduce David Moore, who has joined the Combined Authority. Is our new Assistant Director of Business, Trade and Investment. And David, I just wondered whether you wanted to say a few words and introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I very much enjoy coming back to this region because I spent 12 years of my life doing trade and investment here a little while back, but in intervening years I've been in 3 other regions, 2 in Yorkshire and before that in East Midlands, and it's really interesting to see how different regions do better than others in some areas of focus, and that's very much where I'd like to emphasise the strategy and bring out the opportunities we have in our sector focus as we build our sector champions and build up, extend our team, and also look to improve innovation as well and business growth here and trade opportunities. And so, thank you for welcoming me here. I'm meeting each of you individually. Look forward to those conversations, and it was great Friday before last to really kick off the first international work by meeting with Mayor Nick Johnson and the South African delegation who came over. High Commissioner, I'm honorary consul. One of those, the honorary consul, is a very high net worth individual in South Africa that's deeply involved in life sciences there, and it's great to kick off with that initial opportunity. So happy to update people on that visit and what might come of it. They're really keen to work with us. So thank you.
Thank you, that's sweet. Thank you, Richard. And just as a reminder, and usual CPCA is a bell badges on over, you can find out briefly business board members for those that aren't attending, which as well, please. It's always nice to fly the virtual flag whenever we're at events or meetings. Good, thank you for your update, Richard. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to the finance delivery and monitoring section of today's agenda. Item 8 is the economic growth strategy implementation plan update. Steve Clark, Senior Responsible Officer for the Local Fund, is going to take us through.
Yeah, good afternoon, board. This is item 9, by the way. Just threw me for a minute saying it's item 8.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. That's me. So this update provides an update on the progress we're making with the economic growth strategy implementation plan, which was approved at the board back in March 23. The implementation plan was on the back of the economic growth strategy being approved the year before that. This is the second update report since the implementation was approved, so I'll quickly run through it in sync. The programme and project level delivery, so there's 70 different projects and programmes that are listed in the implementation plan contained in the appendix. Currently we're tracking on, so 32 of those are still below 50% of their projected delivery. 18 or above their 50%, and 20 are yet to provide us with a decent update, or our monitoring is yet to elicit a substantive output from the various programs. The question that always comes up, they're all different timelines, they're all different stages of progress, and I know the appendix doesn't necessarily show that. It attempts to, but try not to make it too much of a complicated document. I mean, there are some, in 2.1 of the report, there are some examples of things that are doing quite well. I'm not going to run through those, but you can see obviously from reading the report. In terms of our own strategic level delivery, the key element really is this recruiting of the resources within the directorate to champion and lead on the priority sector strategies, which make up a key chunk of that economic growth plan. And so we've recruited 3 sector champions thus far: the life sciences, the advanced manufacturing, and the decarbonisation and green tech. The recruitment for the other 3 roles continues. and it's a tough market out there. So we will keep battling and keep going until we can recruit those. Also noted there in the report is that when we produce this update again in 6 months' time, we'll look to bring some update on the actual data points which were in the economic growth strategy implementation plan. On page 32 of that implementation, there's a set of metrics set out, which were the key high-level data points: GBA, jobs, prosperity, that type of stuff. But we'll bring, they're captured in CPCA's own corporate KPIs, balanced score. We'll bring an update summarised just for this implementation plan next time. And then finally, funding to support delivery, as has already been mentioned, the funding obviously is slightly constrained. So, but we do have 2 other funds on the horizon in the MTFP, which will help maybe unlock or drive some of the projects that are linked or held in this plan. They are the strategic growth funds, 20 million, the levelling up, 10 million. There is another report to this board on that, so we'll cover that when we get to it. And then finally, the last part of the report talks about the local growth plan. Proposing here set out for the board to consider next steps sometime during the second half of this year to turn the current economic growth strategy potentially into a local growth plan, which all indications are may be required at a government level. So this may not require wholesale rewrite of strategy, the plan, but clearly needs to take account of things that are going on, the shared ambition, state and region, and any other evidence base that the board may want to commission. We may want to look at our own robust evidence base akin to the Cambridge and Peterborough Independent Economic Review to underpin when we do that. So that process, we'll obviously look to procure support to do that, build a team around it, and obviously consult with the business board. And my view, business board to lead the input into developing that plan. And yeah, that's it. Apart from if anyone's got any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve?
Sure.
Or comment, Steve, thank you for the update. Great to see the recruitments now. I know it's been trying for you, but I think to Andy's earlier point about the importance of mapping what's already going on in patch, I think that's so important as these new individuals come into post so that they get off to a positive start. You know, they're not looking down to the dark corridors, not knowing what they don't know. So I think it kind of almost totally underlines and the suggestion that was made earlier.
Yeah, I think part of induction will be making sure that they link up.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I kind of feel like we're ready for a bit of a step change on this, and maybe that's part of the transformation into the local growth strategy. But you know, when we were putting this together, we were hamstrung by certain things, and one of those was not having the in-house team, which we're now in a position to have, and also just looking at the I think it's probably next the project progress. I remember when you were putting this together, it feels a bit like a mishmash of things which are business as usual, ongoing reports and major multi-million funding projects, which are kind of side by side on the same page, and it feels like we ought to differentiate between them. And I really welcome what Anne said about the economic development officers into one of our informal sessions, because it feels like we need to understand their bits, because looking at this, it's really hard to tell kind of if we're doing well on it, or whether we're lagging behind, or whether it's only supposed to be 10% rather than to be at 50% by now. And also it kind of feeds into the stuff that we were talking about at the last workshop, which was what I'm not getting from this is that sense of the sort of spade ready stuff that we need to have on the back burner for when we do get an opportunity. And so I think it's not at all to criticise what we've done so far on this, but I think we need to flip it or energise it or do something different with it now moving forward.
No, I totally agree, and I think the appendix, you're right. You've got some very, very tiny projects, which are probably important to very specific places or people in the patch, but actually there are some very big areas of work still to do a lot more. So I think you're totally right. It's a prioritisation exercise maybe, and that piece about new opportunities is definitely right. The economic growth strategy was always written and signed off as being something slightly live and fluid. So we've not, to this point, we've not changed anything, and maybe turning it into a local growth plan can do that.
I think it's a really important point. One of the things which is that transition is to start to build a line of those projects that are ready to go when funding streams and opportunities come. And that's two-part process, isn't it? It's having that resource to actually look at opportunities and work with constituent councils and see where there's opportunities to feed in at the same time. Requires us to have bigger ears and be out there and look at opportunities that we can bring to the table or ideas, ways that we can perhaps accelerate things. And so I think that's what we're moving to, because there doesn't need to be a step change. We want to see more things happening rather than more great plans. So definitely in the right direction, but I think officers get where we're kind of sitting.
One thing I was thinking about on that in terms of those is a few times when I've spoken to sort of business park owners and that type of thing, they are only building to order. And I do wonder whether that presents opportunities where actually putting up buildings, maybe with some investment, could then create more opportunities for businesses to expand, who maybe don't want a whole building, but creating these mixed tenancy buildings is something that landlords are loath to do often, but sometimes could be helped on that side, or whether there's opportunities around some of the business parks.
It's a fair point. I think the term that often gets raised is the pump priming, that there's an opportunity to kind of be the catalyst to give sufficient confidence for those projects to start and kick off, and then you can look at other organisations or employ them. There's been conversations in the past, and I know different regions have aspirations for business parks, research parks, science parks of different natures on different topics, and they're all things that require something to be the anchor point that starts that conversation off. I think once we
rename all the roads tech corridors.
I think corridor's going to work, or silicon something. But on a serious note, I think that is something that we want to perhaps have that mixture of these projects that we can support and accelerate. Some of the smaller projects have impacted different regions, but not be afraid to go big and go bold. And that's research behind and see what there's opportunities to do something that's more significant for our region.
I was just going to say that adds to the comment around how do we prioritise things. I think one of the things we should be thinking about is that sort of piece around additionality. So what can we fund that would mean that something would happen when it otherwise might not? So I think some of the pieces around development helpful to kickstart, in likelihood it will come forward. So are there particular aspects of the development that maybe wouldn't come forward, and thinking more along the lines of things like incubators or accelerators that really do need some sort of additional funding to be sustainable in the future, and each on its own merit? But it'd be helpful to think about what the pipeline of growth is and where we can have most value.
Okay, I don't see more hands, but for Steve's report, we are just the recommendation is just to note. This stage, there's no decision to try to. So are we all happy to say that we've noted that report? Clearly, Steve, there's an appetite for more conversation. I'm thinking about that, but we want to make sure accelerate into our meeting. Okay, item number 10, I will get the number correct to avoid any further confusion. Plan for new business support delivery arrangements. Chris, this is from you, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. just really to inform you and go through what I've written down here in this report for you, and how we're going to expand the Growth Hub over the next year. The Growth Hub has traded well over the last 5 years under my management through our base funding, which is core funding, which is £298,000 a year, which isn't a lot really for what we do. Four staff that are out and active across the region all day, every day. So you gave us some more money last year, which we're very, very grateful for. We did get our base core funding as well, which we didn't know whether we were going to get it or not. So with the extra funding that the business board have given us, there's some new advisors that we're looking at taking on. These job descriptions are written, they're just waiting to go into HR now. We desperately need a net zero energy green adaptation decarbonisation advisor. Businesses are not looking at net zero the way they should be. We're being pushed more and more by central government to do something about it. We need someone that can go in and spend time with these businesses, not preach to them, but just show them how they could save money, how they could be doing things slightly differently. When you start talking to a resilient business manager about, net zero, they're, oh, I'm not interested. But you start talking, have you thought about the charging points, etc. People are thinking about it, but we just haven't got the time to sit there with them, and write a strategy. So we desperately need a person that can do that. Community interest companies, CICs, social enterprise, charities, and not-for-profit, that is taking up a huge amount of our time currently. And again, these people need time. They need someone, an advisor, to go in and sit with them. If they do need to write an application for national lottery funding, not to write it for them, but to sit there and give them good ideas and, tell them what's good, what's bad, show them what's good and what's bad. Again, the core staff haven't got that time, unfortunately. Manufacturing advisor, with the SMA going, we are going to definitely need a manufacturing advisor on patch that can go in and work with the manufacturers, talk about strategies, etc. That's a definite. We definitely need that person. And business startups and enterprise and entrepreneurship. I've got an older member of staff that's currently delivering startup workshops, etc. I would think that he's most probably going to want to retire next year. So we need someone meant to mentor him, take over from him. He runs a lot of startup workshops for us across the region that go down really, really well. We need someone to replace him, take over from him, and work alongside him. Before putting these job roles together, I worked really, really closely with the local authorities. We've got a really good relationship going. So I went to pains to ask them what they thought we wanted in the region. And these are the roles that would come up in the region. I think with all the local authorities would agree with us on those roles. We've also done something which is working so well with the local authorities. We've decided to do a joint marketing calendar. Again, so that we don't repeat anything. We've got a joint marketing calendar that you guys can have access to if you want to, but all the local authorities have got access to it. We all feed into it, so nothing gets replicated. And if we're going, we can spend. So that's gone down extremely well. Along with our joint marketing, we've got our marketing team and all the marketing teams from the local authorities all together. They have a meeting once every 2 weeks to decide how they're going to advertise programs, how they're going to advertise what we're doing, and etc. So just so nothing gets, duplicated. There's a lot of information out there, and a lot of it's very confusing. So we need to make it as simple as possible and not replicate it, especially with these new grants coming out. These new grants are an absolute minefield for a normal business person. We've gone from dealing with business inquiries to very confused business people. So we need to make the network very clear. We've done that with our website. If you go on our website, CPCA Growth Hub.co.uk, there's a map of the region. So who you pay your council tax to, who you pay your business rates to, click on the region, your grants will come up. That's updated daily at the moment. and there's going to be some teething problems with that, but we're getting there. We're just trying to get clear information out to businesses as quickly as possible on what they're entitled to, so that they can apply for the grants that are coming up. That's about it from the Growth Hub, really. It's business as usual, but the new advisors will make a massive difference to our delivery. And I think it'll be a really interesting year coming forward.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the report. There may be questions. Mike, straight in there, go for it.
Given the sort of the much reduced funding that's available these days, I wondered how much we are looking at how we work with others to deliver these programs. I mean, Barclays are doing huge amounts on net zero programs.
Yep.
Jill, it's Ali are doing an awful lot on the community interests and that sort of. Where there are ways of actually more formally working with partners to say, let's spread the delivery or look at who does what, or just make more effective use of people and funds.
I agree, totally agree. And that's what we've really looked at over the last year, working with the IFM, working with the Chamber, etc. So it's a very much an ongoing process. And there is even talk that maybe even the manufacturing advisor could sit in a manufacturing agency, outside, so that they're sort of linked in with their network, etc. So it's very much ongoing, right?
It's a different mindset, isn't it, in terms of what you do with your budget? Because if you hire one advisor to do something, they will do their marketing, they'll create new programs, that type of thing, as opposed to potentially having a combined team.
It is.
There's a natural question that just wanted to throw out there, which was when we're looking at these different advisors and the roles that we feel our local authorities are asking for, have you looked at other groups within our region that potentially are already offering that kind of advice, so that we're not?
Yeah, I have. Sorry, perhaps I didn't go into enough detail. These advisors will be able to be booked in with businesses and out on 2 hour slots. So these advisors will be out on the road, actually with the businesses, mentoring, working on strategies, etc.
So are there other companies, organisations already offering that kind of advice and support?
Not free of charge, no. There's consultants, they want £600 a day. There's no one doing it free of charge. No one offering that service free of charge at the moment.
Or they need membership organisations, for instance, where you have to pay your membership subscription first and all the taxes. So I see that.
Rebecca.
I just wanted to ask about funding. This is this year.
Yeah.
So I think somewhere it says about the roles being posted by the end of '42. Presumably then for a year then? I mean, are we going to have another discussion about funding sort of Christmas time, ready for 20?
No, I think
Steve,
I can answer that. Yeah, the business board recommended 3 years of funding to enhance the Growth Hub, and that was approved by the authority board and the MTFP. We are a little late getting this into traction for this year, but the funding will be rolled back. So at the point of spending it, we've got 3 years, and however late we get, that funding we'll just ask for it to be slipped where it's not spent into future years, just to make sure that the service we get 3 years service.
I think that was my point, was that it felt like we were going to be doing this for 6 months and almost 3 years seems much more reasonable, but we have to monitor it to check that it's the right stuff in the right place.
I just had a question on how you saw the interaction between your sector specialists, so life sciences, for instance, versus, say, a manufacturing specialist or a sustainability environmental specialist. Because obviously, as you go through different sectors, the implications for greening, for instance, can be very different in different subject areas. So, are you thinking that there'll be some overlap?
Definitely, yeah.
I think that's great.
And learning from back.
Yeah.
Cross learning, cross development.
Yeah, good.
Shannon?
But I was very much along Mike's train of thoughts about not even just where we've got organisations, but even if you've got, say, sole traders who are experts in things like net zero, I was particularly thinking about that pain point you've got, Chris, you know, could you almost create a CPCA tool that you're asking that army of advisors to be able to deploy and find a commercial way to, you know, stimulate them to want to do so, but actually get more bang for buck, and then take into your manufacturing post. They will be sweating national assets like the Catapult network. You know, maybe we've got PWI, we've got IFM. It sounds like those obvious relationships, narratives are happening. But you know, just because we're not in Coventry or Bristol, we should make sure, and I think those organisations would readily make sure that there's boots on the ground. So I think there's some people to make your life a little bit easier in the background.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte.
Some constructive feedback there. I think that the final one probably is in the same way as we talked about business board members having links to different thematic committees. It seems where you've got this potential or this focus on these different thematic strands, and I was thought that it makes sense to make sure that there is a conduit for appropriate business board members on that conversation. Clearly, some have got direct knowledge and understanding in the local business context. But I think what we want to try and do is avoid the kind of having a conversation at a future date saying that's a bad idea. What about that? Well, let's pick up the conversation before. And so, if we can find a way to build that in, I think that would be really, really helpful for members. In terms of this agenda item, our requirement for this group is to vote to endorse the plan that has been presented, the Grove Pub's business support delivery during the next year. Does anybody have any questions? If not, I'm just going to take a vote if we have a consensus. Hello.
So that's a quick question. So in the report, in terms of KPIs, you obviously, these are largely around referrals and helping, which are part of the role. But is there a way to measure a more tangible impact?
We've got the Growth Hub works with DPT targets because we're partly DPT funded. So the targets there are around our DPT targets that we're currently. I haven't just doubled them because we're getting double the staff. I did look into them because these guys are going to be spending a lot of time with clients. So whereas one of my general advisors could do 4 or 5 visits in a day to businesses, I doubt if these specialists will be able to do that. So there's got to be a lot of thought going into that. You're right, Emma. It's not an easy thing, and I think it's going to be something we're going to have to sort of think of as we go on.
Just to add to that, we're also getting a new CRM, which is being rolled out at the moment. Officers are being trained on it, advisory, front-facing staff will use. We'll be looking to capture all of the various metrics, not just the set that Chris has got there as his KPIs, DPT based, but we'll be looking to capture other metrics which will be useful in our reporting, contribution to the CPCA's overall mission. So, yeah, and we could probably add metrics without making it too crazy, but if there were specific things we wanted over time to start collecting and measuring, we could probably do that.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm getting in there a lot these days. One thing I don't see within that is our target customers. Whereas all growth works was all high growth, that type of thing. I assume we've moved away from that. But in terms of the focus of companies we are aiming at now, I mean, does this include freelancers? Does it include retail? Does this include, what does it include? Or is it just companies who are looking to export?
All of the above. Look, P&E's answer, I think, to that. We have to service all of those.
But you can target your marketing and aim at certain people. And before, with the growth works, we're excluding vast proportions of the market, the economy. I'm just wondering if we focus the companies.
Right. Not currently, no. Everything they work is aiming at the moment.
I think there's an obvious flag of concern there because you can't be all things to all people at the beginning. I think Mike's point is really, really valid. Well, I just come back and see Anna wanted to.
I wonder if this links back to Minty's point about where would we be most added value who are the people that are not receiving this support from elsewhere. So I was very struck, Charlotte, that meeting we went to in Peterborough, and listening to that guy from a micro business saying, I had that initial help, and now there's a gap. I'm not big enough to get the next set of help, and I'm not new enough to get the help I was getting before, and I'm stuck. And if there are people who are getting nothing from anywhere else, perhaps those are the people we really should be targeting at this point.
Can I, just to close the loop on this, can I make a recommendation or a request that perhaps you could come present the plan or the updated plan at the next business board meeting, and perhaps share that in advance to give members an opportunity to have a look at that, perhaps share some insights, because I think your ambition to be accessible to all is admirable, and that's what we want to achieve. But the stepping stones to get there require, there's got to be a starting point of focus, because you don't have unlimited funds to do that. And so perhaps there's an opportunity to look at what data is available to support that.
Can I just add, one of the approaches Chris tried to mention, I think he mentioned local authority several times, is we did originally brand this as a Team Cambridgeshire act. And so all of the local authorities are aware of what we want to do and aware of what they are trying to provide and want to work together. Point of getting on the same CRM as everybody else as well. But again, we can add, to minds, there are other organisations, Team Cambridgeshire could be built and expanded. So when developing the sort of focus, we need to take account that it's not just us. We maybe do a part of it, but actually the whole effort is across many organisations.
There may be an opportunity, Chris, if you reach out to Mike, that he might be able to have a conversation, just to share some thoughts as well. And I'm sure any of the business board members, if you felt there was an opportunity for a chat, we'll go to share something. But I think, given this is something that's really important as part of our broader strategy, I think it's really good that we try and encourage that regular bring back to the business board, capture where we can support on that, so we support positive impact at the end of it. Thank you, Chair. Are we happy on that basis to have a consensus on that, Becky? I haven't actually done that, so I'll take that to yes. Yes, so the consensus is what? We'd like another report. I would like to be presented at the next. Everyone happy with that? Yeah, right. So sufficiently officially. No, we don't need to take a vote. I'm sure if there's anybody who disagrees, they will make their decision. Richard, that's not the time.
What I was going to suggest was, would it be useful to have an informal session on this? If we're talking about prioritisation, business support, and we're talking about, target market, target sectors, maybe spatial priorities. If that's the way it's going, then do you think we need an informal session?
I think an informal session could be helpful. There may not be all business board members, but there's certainly some that have got experience and relevant sector points that would be worth bringing together. My suggestion, and again, I'm happy to steer it, whilst that could be organised, which would be fantastic, I think it should still be on the radar as coming back to the formal business board so that we can actually track and see that we've got consensus and support for it. But if you want to try and reach out, as I've suggested, Chris, to members, and perhaps we want to arrange something separately, informally, then absolutely. Yeah. You all happy with that?
I'm very happy with that. Just have one further around the prioritisation, just to clarify. For your advisors, are you expecting businesses to come to the advisor, or is there also an element of the advisors going out to business?
Very much the advisors going out to the businesses.
Yes, so I think there'll be a difference in how you prioritise provision of the services, depending on which way you're going on the path.
We'll offer both. The way we go at the moment, the advisors are going out to the businesses on the.
Then I would certainly value thinking about what we're prioritising, who we're prioritising, and why. That's brilliant.
Sounds like you've got some free advice in the room that's available to you. That's what we want to try and encourage. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 11. Strategic Growth Fund and Levelling Up Fund update, which Steve alluded to earlier. Steve is actually going to be presenting this now. Louisa, since she's able to attend today. So over to you for this one, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. So the key purpose of the report is to update you all on the 2 funding lines that were added to the MTFP in January. Also, the report is seeking to ask for your ask you to recommend reallocation of the growth works unspent capital, approximately 1.5 million to add to the strategic growth fund to be deployed in that manner. The proposal here is for the 2 funds to be developed on through the stages. So the funding lines are in the MTFP, awaiting the next stage of the process, which is to write a programme business case to secure the funding. Until we have that approved at board, the funding will obviously sit in the budget line. So, as I've mentioned, the two funds, the Strategic Growth Fund will be targeting, at the moment it's listed in the MTFP as targeting investment into skills and economic capital. Obviously, the board would want to have quite a view, I would imagine, on making sure the focus, the criteria, and everything else that gets set out in that business case meets the objectives that the board wants to see achieved, similar to the economic growth strategy. At the moment, the governance around that strategic growth fund is set to that the business board would propose the projects, and then investment committee or relevant board would then consider that recommendation and approve. So it's in the gift of, as it stands, the business board, as long as we write that into the programme business case, to have a key role in determining the projects. As I've already mentioned, the 1.5 million from Growth Works, this was the unspent capital that was from the equity investment that did not get allocated during the programme. As it stands, it's not allocated to another budget line, which is why we've brought it forward in this paper, just to seek the board's recommendation to add it on. Otherwise, it will probably end up going into the corporate capital budget, and we'd need to make a new case to do something else with it. So at this stage, it's an opportune moment. The levelling up funds that's been proposed is to support local match funding for projects which can significantly leverage external funding. That's the way it's written, but actually it's a bit like the follow-on market towns, although in the MTFP line it talks about targeting areas outside of market towns, out of large non-market town settlements. I actually think that fund could be used in akin to, was mentioned, unlocking particular opportunities in those areas, whether it's unlocking a site or whether it might be unlocking particular programs or projects for local communities that could tick a number of particular outputs. So all of the, I've mentioned the single assurance framework, all of the process would have to go through that new process, which is going live in June. So that determines the level at which where projects have to go if the funding levels increase. So the higher level of funding, the higher level of board it needs to go. We've engaged some consultancy support to help develop the programme business case for both of these funds. We're currently proposing to manage both funds simultaneously. Potentially we could run our process, whether it's a call or whether it's the gathering of projects from board and stakeholders at the same time, and then have two distinct sets of criteria for the strategic growth fund and the levelling up. But the consultants will be starting that work and we'll be consulting with business board first and then going out to other stakeholders together and talk about the most effective way we'll run that. That 2.2 in the report, we've set out the things we aim to establish within the business case, so the objectives, KPIs, and other resources needed and process. We'll also identify, obviously, what the focus of target is, so who the key beneficiaries we want to see, perhaps demand in the market, the nature of the funding, how it's deployed, so whether that's grants, loans, or equity funding, and the sort of distribution of funds, and then obviously the appraisal and due diligence that will run around those. And currently we're suggesting a 16-week time frame to turn this program business case round with all that consultation moved in and everything else. So yeah, and finally, obviously we're hoping the proposal will deliver some of the director objectives in the business plan during the current 23-25. But obviously it's got to sit under the objectives that currently stand in the combined authority, so achieving good growth, ambitious skills and employment, and enabling growth. I'll leave it there and take your questions.
Thank you, Steve. There was one item that was something I discussed with you when we were going through the briefing list, which is there was original intent about capital funding, but talking about the strategic growth fund. And whilst there's no, so I can see there's no unreasonable reason why we wouldn't move into that fund. I do think there should be, as we try to do a lot of things, a degree of notional ring fencing, but its intent shouldn't change. Because we obviously have all sorts of priorities across that region. But as that funding was intended to be for stimulus and support that growth, it kind of feels to me that we would not want it to be, for want of a better, lost in the midst, when actually we want to make sure that we follow through on our expectations. And where it's best spent would be a secondary conversation. So again, I'm interested in others' views, but my position would be to support it, but it needs to be signposted an expectation that it will be used for something. So yeah.
Sorry, can I just clarify that 10 million that you were talking about? Is that the level of
1.5. So there's 1.5 that's
5
unspent. Yeah. So it's just goes into a bigger pot.
Yeah.
You know, and to be fair, there's a notional from that 20 million that was settled in the TFB, there's a notional allocation to the university. It's a notional ring fence. It's not still got to go through all the right boots and processing and review and stand up to challenge. And absolutely the same would be, bearing in mind that the board does not have final say on any of these things. It makes a recommendation for guidance. But I think that's hot. Yeah. Go for it.
So strategic growth fund, so I can see aligns absolutely with our economic growth and the vision of business board. The levelling up there in the concept of sort of a market towns version, while sometimes that has been, it's been important for business board, but it's not always been about business growth and development, economic growth and development. Is that, in layman's terms, our money to,
yeah.
or will it deliver on other things which aren't economic?
So it's a good point, because the previous market towns have done a rafting. The way this is written into the MTFP, it's definitely not committed to all of the things that market towns did. And it does talk about opportunities for employment skills in those non-market town areas. So my view, and I think it's right, would be we should use it for the purposes of economic growth type projects as well, but maybe it has to have a distinct localized feature because it's the strategic program has no geographic, there's no geographic boundaries put on them. Whereas this one there is, it says in a non-market town setting. So it's almost the rural communities, if you like. So we just need to think smart how the two funds, their objectives can be met and deliver the type of projects. But yeah, I think whilst we've had a market towns program, I know it kind of makes this thing, the way I said that, actually it doesn't have to follow exactly what we've done before, because there was a lot about public realm in those. It doesn't have to be, although it is capital, or both of these are capital, so you know they will be tangible projects on the ground.
Okay. I still think the points are pretty valid. We need to make sure that we're thinking about how far it's leverage. There was a flurry of hands there, so I'm not sure if Minty being out or vice versa, but go for it, Emily.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick question, Steve. With 1.5 million underspent on capital, just trying to understand what the lessons learned from that, why we're in that situation, and how do we sort of mitigate that?
You don't want me to tell you.
No, it's very good. So no, it's a very good question because obviously you know the history, but Nitin's laughing because he was involved in the panel that was making decisions.
Slightly less serious, but there wasn't as many companies as we thought would be around fit the criteria of looking for equity and growing employment. Or they were growing.
Just to be clear, we had within growth works, we had a lot of money to do capital grants. That all went fine. People are happy to take the grants. We had a lot of money to equity invest in growing companies. And as Nitin's rightly said, the companies, we had companies come forward, the quality, the standard, the investability, shall we say, just wasn't there necessarily. So it was also late starting, to your point in lessons learned. That part of the growth works program started very late. There were a number of contractual issues between the subcontractors early doors that prevented it getting going. And frankly, they ran out of time as well. It was not the pipeline coming forward that's investable. So bottom line, 1.5 billion left over. The proposal is, as you said, to add it to this because then it gets wrapped up in targeting the outputs and objectives of this fund, as opposed to, we could, I suppose, could have offered up a different solution to spend it still on equity or continue that, but we don't have a contractor or a mechanism currently, so we'd have to start again basically trying to put that together.
One was just a point of clarity. So are we proposing 20 plus 1.5?
Yes.
Yes. And then the other was actually just interest around, so are we proposing to have one single call for a pot of 21.5 and a pot of 10?
Well, this to be determined within developing the programme business case, but it could be for the effect of managing time, resources and confusion. We could manage it that way. Or if we think there's distinctly two different target markets, we could run it completely separate. But we'll determine that as we go through development progress and what's the best mechanism to deliver it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'd all like to be involved in sort of initial scoop up, if you like, of potential projects and thinking about the timelines of when they could come through. So I guess that might also play into when you launch my performance, although I appreciate it has to fit within the timeline of the plan.
It's a good point. Currently in the MTFP, it's programmed over 4 years. So, there is a time challenge there, which we've seen before can happen with capital projects about deliverability. So,
yeah.
Richard.
Yeah, no, just really thinking through, sort of the timing of this in relation to, what's going on, sort of nationally and externally. I think this could catch up with, sort of what's falling out of our shared ambitions work and everything else. And if you sort of look at, you know, our legacy as a combined authority, and you look at, you know, some of the early findings, some of the things that have been said, some of the reviews, we've got a lot of interventions at very small scale, you know, multiplicity of lots of projects, and it feels like we really need to move away from that and move towards bigger scale, bigger impact, and more leverage. And I think it would be potentially a missed opportunity for this fund if we weren't to leverage it to its full potential. So it might actually find its way into wider negotiations and discussions, whether that's with private sector, whether it's with pension fund opportunities, or whether it's with you know, new conversations with national government. So I think we need to just be careful not to repeat some of the things we've done in the past in a way that sort of, well, we've got a fund, so we'll ask everybody what should we do with it, you know, because I don't think that would be the best use of how we move forward as a combined authority in the agenda we've got to make that difference as well.
Yeah, I agree. Well, to add to that, is there any way of thinking about the benefits realisation of what has been previously funded, or some of the learnings of, you know, don't fund XYZ project because it never realises its full potential, or, you know, that I think would be very helpful when we're starting thinking about prioritising the next tranche in terms of how previous.
There's been somewhat
central government are driving us through that process.
We've got 2 evaluations that we've already done on local growth projects. So there's actually quite a lot of pointers, learning, recommend lessons in there. So we can reshare those.
That'd be great. Yeah.
I think the point raised, which is always the usual thing to focus on, is having got those evaluations, that evidence, can we see a correlation from that in how it's reshaped our planning or our purpose for the next stage? You know, and I appreciate we're looking at different types of projects. I think the tool is really useful. It's either something for small interventions, or it's something that's a lever that could lead to something more significant. So ironically, it's one of those ones where we don't want to dive in too quick, and we want to make sure we've got a piece of research and learning connect together on Mike.
It is, but it does also sometimes feel like we're starting from scratch again. And that, you know, in terms of, you know, there was a lot of effort and a lot of money spent through growth works, where there's some investments and some work we did through that, so where we can say, that was good, let's do that again, you know, or do something similar again, because it's not starting from a blank sheet of paper. You know, we invested in accelerators with Star Code or the others. Was that a good investment? Should we look for other accelerators to invest in? You know, these sort of things would be helpful to bring back, you know, to ourselves, to be able to say, well, actually, that will guide some of our future investment.
The university intervention, and that sort of huge number of awards already.
Let's build another one.
Has it done what it's supposed to do though? Yet?
Sorry?
Has it done what it's supposed to do yet? Which will not surprise me. Yeah. It's upskilling on young people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but it was always a long range plan.
No, I know. You need to be careful. You know, early stage startup, so with lots of surprises.
Also, in terms of marker, this is what the business board have helped to achieve for the region. It's a fantastic project. Therefore, it's a real game changer for a particular area. Whereas, to your point, Richard, around some of the smaller ones, they kind of get lost. Hard for you then to be able to show.
I think it's having the space for these kind of conversations. One point resonates. It's not a case of saying, well, things we've done well before, we should forget them. It's understanding whether should we do more of those things that we have worked well, or is there something else on the radar we haven't thought about that could have more significant impact? And it's understanding that there's so many of these different strategic reviews that we've got going on. They're only valid if you pull them together and say, do they actually shape our decision making? Or are they just really interesting reports? Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating for effect, so I know they are in terms of how officers are looking at things. But I think it's the business board in terms of saying, giving you sound advice. The sound advice can either be at a tiny level of looking and saying that project probably will work as it did last time. Or it can be, you know what's coming down the hill. Around the country, other people are doing this. So unless we find some money to do the same, we're going to miss an opportunity. And then it comes to that discussion of which is more important. And, you know, I appreciate everyone gets that. So I suppose the more that's on the table, the easier it is for us to have this kind of challenging conversation.
I think there are probably also some really important conversations for us to have around what evaluating impact looks like, because sometimes a very small scale targeted project can show very clear, specific, measurable impacts very quickly. But it doesn't mean that the larger, more complicated project isn't going to have a greater impact over the course of time. But it's much harder to go, right, well, we put in 2,000 and this has come out the other end. I mean, so something like ARU Peterborough, that's going to take years before we get a really clear idea of whether that's worked. That's the nature of something like that. So I suspect there's a conversation around how we evaluate impact and what, I guess this may not be quite the right word, but what level of risk almost we take along the way in terms of those quite ambitious projects, and what kind of intermediate measurables are we expecting to see. And those things obviously are really challenging.
That's the key, isn't it? At what stage?
Absolutely.
The university particularly, who had one before. And it's not there.
I think there is, I think this is challenging, is healthy, but I think we also are already thinking that we started off with very clear measures, and there's still that sense of projects that deliver on GDA or on creation of jobs. And it is just more nuanced than that. We're sat in a building right now that was a combined. And it's a thriving hub on the Esther University students here, but there's also businesses and organisations, networking, collaborating. How do you put a price? You know, there has to also be that sense of the level of feedback, and is it actually helping to prime conversations, innovations, opportunities? I know you need a mix and balance of the two. You know, the same is with the university. It's got to get to a certain critical mass to have the output of students that are then delivering jobs or startup organisations. So you can only take the litmus test moving along in terms of how it's developing and expanding and how the infrastructure and partnerships are growing. I think there's lots of positives. We don't typically have that revisit opportunity on most projects that have gone in the past to say 4 years down the line, how many jobs did you have? And was it all down to us, or was there something else? So that, put them all on the table, I hope gives us a chance to say, economic benefit and jobs is a really handy measure, but what about adding to skills? What about, as you raised, that it's the catalyst for something much bigger to come and have additionality, which wasn't there before? And how do we act about it as well? I'm sure it's an easy one, but I feel like we always have a knack of talking about something, and then a week after decision, there's a new bit of data and a new report, and if we can streamline it, we might feel like we're all getting the maximum. I'm conscious we've taught this topic a lot, and I guess that's probably why Louisa was suddenly unable to attend, because she knew we were going to be talking about this. But as always, Steve, I appreciate you coming in and sharing it. There are, as on the other hand, two recommendations here. So the first is to note the update on the development of the Strategic Growth Fund and Levelling Up Fund contained before, something that was laid out originally in the NFB. And the second is to recommend that the CPCA board reallocates a maximum of 1.5 million unspent capital from the Strategic Growth Programme to the Strategic Growth Fund, brackets, with a flag to say we'd like to try and encourage it for its original intent. Similar projects. I do need to have a vote. Are we happy with part A? Is there a consensus? Okay, for formality, partly I need to take a vote. So can I ask for those that are in favour? Recommendation for part B? And all those that are against? Okay. Steve, thank you for that. We're on to the home straight now. George, back to you. Item 12, business board delivery.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly share my screen. So I don't really want to repeat a lot of what's been said, because a lot of what actually goes into our annual report delivery plan is a lot of what's been discussed already. But just for context for some of the newer members, perhaps the annual report is something that we have as a standing item at these AGMs while we've been part of the LEP network. Some of you may be aware that that is coming to an end now. The government funding for the LEP network is coming to a close. So this is the last kind of annual report of its kind to be presented at the business board. And what we've done this time is we've had a lot of officers pull in their kind of expertise in the projects and programs that they're kind of leading on or overseeing the development of. And we split it into a looking backwards part and a looking forwards part. And that looking backwards part will be a lot of things that you're already quite familiar with. So things like the progress at ARU University and the Market Towns programme. I'm sure Don was here, you'd be able to go into a bit more detail there. And then the looking forwards bit is really looking at what's coming next in the next year. So things like UK REAP and what our plans for are to that, how we're going to engage beyond that. ARU University again, so phase 3, the Living Lab, what's going to happen there. So I'm not going to go into massive detail in terms of each of those things because the report is, as I'm sure you can appreciate, very, very long. But really what we need is from you and what we're asking for is just to recommend that you, the Combined Quality Board approves that. And I think we'll probably leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, a full report and document. Thank you to all those involved in curating that. The LEP network, just to clarify, although its funding is ceased, it is moving into a different shape and form. So I think that there potentially will still be a platform to share ideas of best practice between business boards from around the country rather than LEPs from around the country. So in terms of this, are there any questions anybody wants to flag? Again, Richard, bad timing.
Sorry, just really quickly, I just wanted to, and I should know the answer to this, but is there an expectation that we submit this to dealer?
We will, yeah.
So
even though I'm not sure they have an expectation of LEPs producing these at the point of close down, but we will. It'll be a surprise.
I just think in light of that, then we just need to, we need to just be given the flexibility to, tidy it up and make it.
Zhuzh it up a bit.
Yeah,
great Rebecca, voluntary.
No, I'm not volunteering. But I will make some comments. A couple of things. One is I've been very pedantic. I don't think there's a delivery plan. So I don't know if it's supposed to have a delivery plan as part. Doesn't feel like it. I think looking at the looking ahead bits, there's some bits that are pulled out, which are clear that they are some things that are happening this year. It doesn't have a kind of holistic feel about we are as a business board planning to do for the year ahead. It feels like, I don't know whether that just needs an extra intro and here are some of the extra bits, but if we just do UK REAF and the growth hub, it's kind of not enough. So I just feel like that section needs a little bit more work. And then just based on our experience of last year, I think I haven't done it, but we check that we've got different case studies than we've used previously, because there is some of the things that we've done have been bigger successful, and there is a tendency to choose those to be a case study because they are multi-year projects. And I think we've got plenty of successes around the area to make sure that we choose different ones than ones we've used before.
I can follow up with the answers for that. And as Richard and Steve said, when we do come to submitting that to dealer in terms of that board section, certainly we have a refresher plan.
Difficult to disagree with that feedback. I think that's all constructive. Thank you. In light of that, can I reframe my question to ask whether we are happy to approve the annual report delivery plan subject to the amendments that is suggesting that you be
The decision is also subject to the report. And we need it.
So I think just
I did so.
Okay. Apologies, just going to take that. So we're happy on consensus to approve that, subject to as amended. Part B, we do need a vote, is to recommend the client for the board approves the business rules or approve that, subject to the event, and for this to be submitted to the citizen local growth. Can I have a show of hands if everyone's happy with that? Is the next step. Anybody not happy? Thank you. It's a strange formality, but in essence, we're agreeing it, and then separately, we're agreeing it can be recommended to the combined protocol to accept it. Good. Thank you, everybody. You're pleased to hear, or sad, depending on how much you've enjoyed proceedings, that we have reached the end of our agenda today. Do we have any other business? No. Can I just show a thanks to at this lovely location, West Hub. It's a great space, fantastic to see it.
I hope we paid for the screens.
They're really,
They're really good.
there is some fantastic subliminal. I encourage you to watch a highly enjoyable YouTube video with Nick Johnson and myself having a full tour of the premises. High production quality, I can assure you. But on a serious note, there are some fantastic resources here. I think we all saw today just quite how busy and popular the space is. So a great example of making a community space. Beyond that, thank you already for seeing you all very soon. And thank you to those who joined online.
I said that.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Sam.
Unfortunately.
Very good.